According to the National Institute of Mental Health, approximately 26.2% of Americans age 18 and older suffer from a diagnosable mental disorder in 1 year. My next guest is helping to raise public awareness and to improve the understanding of mental health and mental illness. Mary Lynn Reynolds is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association in Southwestern New Jersey. Welcome, Mary Lynn.
Thank you for having me, Joanne.
I love it. Anyway, it's really, I think what you folks are doing is really important. We've had some time to talk. Why is it so important, Mary Lynn, to really change the perception and to kind of eradicate the stigma that goes with mental illness?
Well, as you just mentioned, 1 in 4 Americans will experience a mental illness during their lifetime. And so all of us have somebody in our life, whether it's a friend or a family member, who struggles with mental illness. And mental illnesses can interrupt your life. They can make it hard to study. They can make it hard to go to work. They're disruptive to relationships. Just like having a physical illness, mental illness is something that can be very problematic in your life. So one thing that we have learned that is quite alarming is that an individual they find that the onset of mental illness is usually ignored, and that it can take up to 10 years between when someone starts exhibiting symptoms to when they actually get treatment.
So is that because people are not understanding it, or they don't understand what some of the symptoms are, or that it's happening too young, or what's going on?
I think it's because of stigma. No one wants to think that they or someone they love is crazy. And
okay,
so
but that's a harsh word. And
it is a harsh word, but that, let's be honest. I mean, it's frightening to think that you may not be in control of your mind. And so you rationalize that, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing or with what they're doing. And so we go into denial. And as a parent, you do not want your child to be labeled as, having depression or, being anxious. You don't want that to get in the way of applying to schools or sports or other families wanting their children to play with your children. So it's something that we're very private about.
So we're hiding it a lot, and not only hiding it from other people, we're also hiding it from ourselves. I found something out just recently that about 1 million children, young children, are suffering from some kind of mental illness. And like you said, it's being hidden, it's not being discovered. So what happens if that stigma persists and people are being undertreated or not getting the interactive kinds of help that they need?
Well, unfortunately, as with any disease, it reaches a crisis, and so the individual might end up having to be hospitalized, might end up having to be on medication. Not that being on medication is a bad thing, but if you let cancer go for 10 years untreated, you could die. And so I think that mental illness is equally serious.
And so often the community's perception, Mary Lynn, of mental illness is it's somebody who not only has a mental health problem, but is going around tearing up schools, shooting people. Right. And so there's a lot of fear and a lot of anger, I think, regarding mental illness. What is your association doing to change the perception?
Well, unfortunately, the horrific events of the past 2 years have fed into this misperception that everyone who has a serious mental illness is violent. And so again, by working, we're currently doing a program called the Crisis Intervention Team, which is a national best practice model that comes out of Memphis, Tennessee, and is being used throughout the United States, that in addition to getting our mental health treatment providers to talk to our police department about how to work together to help these citizens, it also provides a 40-hour comprehensive training for police officers.
So what happens here is that police officers are rather than, if somebody is acting a little wild or a little belligerent or whatever, a police officer, rather, you and I were talking before, rather than deciding, okay, this person needs to be in jail, you're working with them to understand that maybe there's a mental health problem going on so that something else needs to happen.
I mean, one thing that we try to help the officers understand is that someone who has a mental illness cannot control their behaviors, and they're not being intentionally belligerent, that this is part of their illness. And so what we've done some really creative things. We have a panel of individuals who live with mental illnesses, and they have diagnosis from schizophrenia to bipolar disorder, some pretty serious illnesses. Actually come and do a class presentation, and they look as normal as you and I sitting here.
And they are.
And
we
they
all
are.
have friends and family
Absolutely.
like that. Right.
And so by having these individuals talk about their diagnosis and how they were treated and their encounter with the law, it's a real aha moment for the officers. So, you know, what we want to have happen is that when the officer has the initial encounter, they have an understanding that this is somebody with an illness, just like somebody with diabetes, and so they respond differently than this is somebody that's just being a belligerent jerk.
And so what happens is that because their response is different, then the people who have a mental health issue respond to the police differently, and it just changes the whole perception and the whole
the whole outcome. You know, we teach nonviolent interventions, and so by teaching the officer what tone of voice to use, how to hear what the person's saying, how to look them in the eye, how to acknowledge them, that in turn changes the individual's behavior, and they become less agitated and more cooperative.
Well, I think it's so important, and the model is really something that I hope everybody in other states are using.
Right, Google it, Crisis Intervention Team, CIT.
Thank you so much, Mary Lynn. We have more with Mary Lynn right after the break, and we'll be right back.